is one of those things that really differentiates like who is going to find success and who is not. And success, when I say success, I'm talking about consistent success over time. Like, yes, you can have success on small things, but like having consistent success over time. And that requires this element of grit, which has been shown to be the most consistent commonality between successful entrepreneurs, successful uh, uh, athletes, just success in general. Really, this concept, this idea of grit has been one of the most powerful elements that we see consistently along across successful people in life. So I'd be interested to hear, if there's anything in this video that you guys heard that resonated with what you're currently doing as entrepreneurs.
Well, in the first video, it was very special also. It says to be successful in life, you don't have to be special. It's
Yes.
about showing up, it's about passion, it's about perseverance, and you just have to keep climbing.
Yes.
And in the second video, to be honest with you, I had to look up the word grit. It's about personal qualities like perseverance, courage, resilience.
Yeah.
And is often used as someone who shows determination.
Yeah.
So, I learned, this word today, but I find both video to be very helpful.
Yeah.
It's about motivation and moving forward. So I like it.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that's kind of interesting about this idea of grit is it's really, it's the, because I mean, yes, we talk about determination and perseverance and stuff like that. And the thing that I think is, at least for me, that makes grit a very simple element is this idea of, regardless of what the outcome is, I'm going to take a step forward, right? I'm going to get back up and keep doing it. I'm going to take the extra step. I'm going to make the extra phone call. I'm going to do the extra open house in terms of business. I'm going to continue to just move forward, right? So it's the thing that drives the determination and perseverance, because perseverance and determination are the things that you kind of see, like you kind of like recognize it afterwards. Oh yes, this person was very determined. This person has this perseverance that allows them to keep moving. But grit is like that moment in your mind where you're just like, you know what? I don't care where we are right now. I'm going to take the next step. I'm going to take the next step forward, right? And grit is not necessarily a destination. It's just the next step, right? So you don't have grit to become the best realtor that you can be, right? You have a determination to be the best realtor that you can be. And grit is the steps that you take, right? I'm going to keep taking that step. I'm going to keep grinding to get to that end goal, right? So that was really powerful for me. It really talks about, to your point, and showing up with consistency, right? That is the thing that really is big. People get into entrepreneurship and think that, oh, well, I'm going to do this thing and it's going to change the world. And really, the things that make a difference are not like these big sweeping things. It's showing up consistently over time, right? That is an element of grit that I think is powerful. Just this idea of fighting your fight. I thought that was really intense. This was good. Practice, fail, and try again, right? The idea of like you just like you practice music, just like you practice in sports, like in your business, you also practice. And believe me when I tell you, you're going to fail, and that's okay. You just got to get up and you try again until you find success. We have to remember that, the most successful people are also the people that experience the most failure. You guys understand? Like, The most successful people are the people that are able to withstand the highest amount of failure, because that is how they find success. That makes sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we have to be willing to fail. We need to be comfortable with this idea of failure and know that it is a process. It's a part of this process, right? It's a part of the process of becoming a successful entrepreneur. So that was really good. Having more stamina than everyone else, right? This idea, again, this is showing up consistently. And even when you're tired, even when you feel like, I don't know if I could take another step, I don't know if I can continue to do this, having the stamina to say, you know what, I don't know how far I'm going to get, but I'm going to take one more step forward, right? Just having that stamina to just take one more step. Without sacrifice, there is no gains. I thought that was like, wow, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you can't expect to have gains if you are not willing to take sacrifice. I was actually talking with a friend of mine, and he was making a move, and he wants to save some money, so he's downsizing his situation. And he was like, oh yeah, but I'm not going to be able to do this thing that I want to do on a regular basis. I'll have to do this other thing that's a little bit inconvenient. And I was telling him, I'm like, listen, sometimes if you have a goal and the goal is outside of your ability to afford all the things that you like and be able to attain the goal, then you're going to have to make a sacrifice in order for you to get to that goal, right? There's going to be something that you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice. You just have to identify what you're going to be willing to sacrifice, right? And that is going to be what ultimately will help you determine whether or not you're going to actually achieve that goal. It takes a reason. This is kind of what we talk about, like, what's your why? What is your why? Like, why are you doing all of this? You need to have a reason. If you don't have a reason, like, it's going to be really difficult for you to continue to take those steps forward, right? Whether that is, for yourself, for your family, for, some goal you need to make that will allow you to live the lifestyle that you want, whatever your reason is. It could be for your kids, it could be for your parents, it doesn't matter. You need to have a reason. You need to have that big why. That is going to help push you forward. So it takes a reason, right? And then you have a responsibility to yourself. When you own a business, especially, you have a responsibility to yourself to fulfill, like, your own goals. Nobody else is going to fulfill your goals for you, right? So you have a responsibility to yourself. And by being able to make that happen for yourself, it empowers you to be able to do things for others. So if you have a why for your kids, right? I want to do this for my kids. It's like, I'm trying to make a better life for my kids, as an example. Well, you have to have responsibility to yourself to get these things done so that you can put yourself in a position to do these things for your kids, or for your church, or for your community, or for whatever it is your why is. But it's in an airplane, if it's going down, you put the oxygen on yourself before you put the oxygen on your kids. You guys heard this before, yes? So the reason why that is because if you're spending all that time trying to put oxygen on your child and you pass out, well, guess who's helping your child? No one. So if you can't put that oxygen on yourself to make sure that you're good, how can you possibly help someone else? So, you have a responsibility to yourself to be able to make this happen, okay? So, all right, so that's all I got. Any other comments or thoughts on that? No? Okay. So we're going to get into just some things that are happening in the market. I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. So if you haven't heard already, there is a conversation that DeSantis is currently having about, the idea, and I don't know if this is going to have any, if this is going to actually be something that will happen or can happen, they can make happen or not. But it's an idea. It's interesting. DeSantis is wanting to replace property taxes. In other words, to remove property taxes altogether and replace it with something else, most likely some kind of a sales tax or some kind of consumption tax, right? Like, and we have a lot of tourism here, so it's very plausible that that would be that could potentially work. I don't know the numbers on it, but if if there's enough dollars being spent here through tourism and through entertainment, arts and entertainment and stuff like that, possibly that could be a real potential. It would mean that there would have to be a higher sales tax on things. The question is what exactly is going to be taxed to help make up the difference? That is going to be a big question. But if they're able to figure out a way to remove property taxes, which would be huge, that would have a huge impact in the Florida real estate market. I mean, it would be astronomical because it means that depending on what your tax burden is, your $2,500, $5,000, $7,500 tax bill eventually essentially goes away, which if you have a mortgage impacts how much you pay in your mortgage, which means that people would have the ability to afford a more expensive home because now that tax bill is not there. That extra few $100s a month that they're paying can now be applied towards a mortgage payment, which means that their ability to afford housing goes up, right? And if the values are going up, now they have the ability to buy a more expensive home with the same income that they currently have because now this tax burden is out. It's interesting idea. I don't know if it has any teeth. It is something that is being seriously discussed at the state level. So it would be a good idea to be paying attention to where that's going, how that's going to ultimately impact real estate, whether or not they're going to be able to get that moving in any direction. There are definitely some logistical challenges because property taxes, because we don't have income tax, property tax is the main source of income for the state to pay for police and fire and all of the sort of services that we get that help our infrastructure for our state. So there would have to be some other very stable income that would have to replace it. So I don't know what that will ultimately look like, but it's an interesting idea and directly impacts our industry. So it would be a good idea for you guys to be paying attention to how that's going to transpire and what ultimately happens with it. So just be aware of that. Some interesting things some interesting numbers that we're seeing for January as compared to what we've seen in the past. Our supply of inventory has gone up quite substantially. So we're looking at a little over 7.5 months of inventory compared to January of last year, which was about almost 5 months of inventory, and December, which was very similar, right? So December, had about, let's see if I have the numbers here. December, had about 4.6 months of inventory. So you can see January popped up quite high. This is likely because people were waiting to put their home on the market. They're waiting for the new year to put their home on the market, and we got a lot of people who threw their home on the market in January. So there's a lot more listings that are coming that came onto the market in January, in addition to the listings that have been hanging about through the holidays. So this gets us on the flip side of the buyer's market. Before we were kind of like, it was leaning that way, and it was definitely beneficial to buyers, but sellers still had a little bit of leverage, but it's very small. Right now, it's 7.73 months of inventory. That is solidly in a buyer's market. Like, that is no mistaking the market that we're in. If that consistently stays into February, if we get the numbers back from February and see the same numbers, there is no doubt that it's a buyer's market. The likelihood is, in order to move products, in this case homes, there's a very good chance that sellers are likely going to have to adjust pricing and be much more generous with concessions. So definitely prepare your clients and future clients with this data. This is really important data for them to be aware of. We jumped solidly into a buyer's market as of January, as of the January numbers, where 6 months of inventory is considered to be kind of like right in the middle. So between 5 and 6, it would be kind of like in the middle. We were hanging around 5, and now we're in almost at 8. So now it may be a little bit of a spike, like I said, because of people coming into the market waiting for the new year. So it's very plausible that February, that number may go down. I don't know how much it'll go down, so we'll have to wait for those numbers to come out. So we'll see how that continues, but it is good to make sure that you share with your client base that, and anyone who's interested in selling or buying, that, as of January, we are almost 8 months of inventory, which puts us very squarely in the middle of a solid buyer's market where buyers really have the highest amount of leverage and sellers don't have very much leverage at all. So for those of you who have listings, make sure that your sellers understand that this does not necessarily is not great news for them. They're going to have to be a little flexible with their pricing. They're going to have to be flexible with their concessions in order to get a home sold, because there's a lot of competition out there. There's just a ton. For those of you, if you have buyers, if there's a buyer out there that you're working with, it's going to be really important that you advise your buyers that, hey, listen, you got a lot of options. You have a lot of leverage. If this doesn't work out, there are other homes that you can choose from, and sellers are going to have to make some concessions in order to get their home sold. So they have a lot more leverage here. Now, the challenge that we're going to run into is that it spiked in January, and we have to see how consistent that's going to be over time. 1, and 2 is that how sellers are going to respond to this spike of inventory that jumped into the market so quickly in such a short amount of time. So sellers may not necessarily feel that pain immediately. It may take them a month or two to realize that, oh, okay, we're not seeing as much activity and it's not moving. We're going to have to just adjust our price point or offer some really great concessions in order to make this happen. But I do think this is important information that you as an agent, as a professional, need to know. And if you have any buyers or sellers out there, that they need to be aware of. Okay, this is obviously specifically related to residential. The commercial market typically follows residential, so we'll see how that goes moving forward. And then in terms of some other numbers that I thought was kind of interesting, we did see mortgage rates, while they're higher this January than they were last year, it's only by a little bit. So it looks like by about, barely a quarter of a percentage point, a little more than a quarter of a percentage point higher than last January. However, it is the lowest that we've seen this year. So we're sitting at by the end of January, 6.85 was basically what we're seeing at the end of January. It is the lowest that we've seen in the last 8 weeks. So that's, I guess, it's good. Hopefully that continues to trend that way, that mortgage rates will continue to slowly start trickling down, which I feel like that will likely happen, that mortgage rates will slowly trickle down. It probably not going to make any big moves. It'll probably continue to trickle down. But obviously I'm not a soothsayer, so there's no way that I can for sure know that that's going to be the case. Some things that are also important to note is that family spending is about 38% of income on mortgages, which is pretty high. That a lot of that has to do with just the cost of homes right now and where interest rates lay. So it's pretty tight. It's going to be it's a challenge for people to spend money on a purchase, which is why we're not seeing a ton of movement in the markets. And even though there are still buyers currently actively doing things, people are very, very cost sensitive. So if this whole tax thing works out, that will help a lot. But I don't know that we're going to see that materialize in 2025. It's just a conversation being had. So until that time, we have to go with what we know to be true at this stage. The other thing that was interesting to see is that Florida continues to see $1 million earners coming into the state. So the state had about an 8% increase in $1 million earners from 21 to 22. But according to let me see, let me actually pull that up. This was an interesting article. But that number, but nationwide, that number dropped by 2%. So that suggests that for Florida, that's pretty good. Now that was obviously back in 21, 22. Let me see if I have any more updated numbers to that. It just looks like we are getting more people that are in the $1 million income bracket than we've seen in the past. So I mean, that looks like that may have an impact for luxury listings, right? We might see more luxury listings moving a little faster, but that's not saying much because luxury listings tend to stay on the market quite a long time because there's just not that many people that can afford that. But maybe that'll shorten the days on market for that particular sector. So again, just something to note, something to be aware of as you go out there into the world, working with potential luxury buyers and luxury sellers. The only other things is that the Fed is still concerned about inflation, right? So they are not likely to cut rates anytime soon. They usually increase rates to kind of help slow inflation down. So I think they're in a wait and see position. Basically, they are also concerned about the potential tariffs that Trump is talking about. So that, and how that's going to ultimately impact the economy. So depending on how that impacts the economy, I think that they're waiting to see how that impacts the economy and then make a determination on how they're going to make any rate cuts. And while the Fed and mortgage rates are not in parallel, typically there is a sort of a relationship that exists between the Fed and interest rates for mortgages. It's not in direct parallel, but there's usually some correlation. So we'll have to wait and see how they respond to the economy and what the tariffs may do, how they may impact the economy. So it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of turns out. I know that also the average, going back to some of these numbers here, the average, where is it at? The median price for single-family homes, it decreased to $425,000, which was a negative change by about 1.2%. So we're seeing the median price moving in a downward direction. So that's interesting to see. We're also seeing that foreclosures and short sales really are not showing up a lot. So there is a concern with potential foreclosures and short sales because of the sort of boom that came in 20 through 22, and whether people are able to keep work or whatnot. There has been a concern for that. So, there's definitely a tension being made there, but it doesn't look like there's been a lot of foreclosure transactions. So the number of single-family home foreclosures, it remains constant at about 2. Now this is per week. So that's not terrible. Short sale transactions remains at zero, so there's not a lot of short sales that are happening. But it doesn't sound like people are selling because they're in a financial bind. They're selling because they may have a financial need to sell, but it's not because they're necessarily in a financial bind. They're just, they're not, I guess, in the negative, I guess, is what I would say here. That's not necessarily indicative of what the future holds, but that's not the reason why we're seeing people list their homes. It's not necessarily because they're going to be foreclosed on or because there's a short sale about to happen that they have to get out of there. It's just what their needs have changed, or maybe because taxes and insurance has gone up, their cost is more expensive, and they don't want to be paying that, but they're still able to keep up with their payments. So we'll have to see if that changes over time. It'd be interesting to see how that works. So again, time will tell. Now, with regard to condos, we did see a median price of condos decrease by down to about $250,000, which is a negative change by 16.6%. That's huge. That's actually pretty big, right? So we're definitely seeing condos adjusting, where they're having a negative impact. The current market is having a significant impact on condo, townhomes, and villas. So, that the single family homes may follow suit, but it's hard to tell. Obviously, there's no clear predictor of that. Again, people are selling. It doesn't look like they're selling because they're in foreclosure or short sale. Both of those are at zero. So I would imagine a lot of those a lot of those sales were probably investors that had investment properties, and that was maybe a second home for them, or maybe a short-term rental for them, or they just had it as an investment property of some kind, and they're getting rid of them. So there's a good chance that may be the case. Right now, the short-term rental market for sales is really challenging. If you have a home that is currently in a short-term rental community or anything like that, expect to see very long days on market, expect to not see a lot of activity, and expect to see a lot of competition. The activity for short sales has really been impacted by the current economy, and the numbers are just not really making a lot of sense for a lot of these folks who bought into these short sale communities, and now they're not able to fill them enough to be able to make that make sense. So just be aware of that. This is really just information for you to know and to be able to share with your folks. Okay? Any comments? Any thoughts on what I'm saying so far?
Yes. One of my consumers' biggest concern, to be honest with you, is not property tax. It's about homeowners insurance. I've had people who gone up from $2,000 per year to like $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
What can you actually say to them? A lot of people is walking away because of the property tax issues.
Yeah, that is a challenge. Property taxes continues to be a challenge. I will say that there has been some legislation that was designed to address that, at the state level. Supposedly this year there is supposed to be a pullback on the cost of insurance. We haven't necessarily seen that manifest just yet, but according to the state, they're expecting to see a pullback in the cost of insurance. Based on the legislation that was put in place. So hopefully we will see that manifest by, before the end of 2025. Again, that's a prediction. So, and I think that's really just sort of a hope that the state has based on some legislation that they were working on over the last couple of years. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of that manifest. I can't predict what that's going to look like, but that's the best that we can do at this stage, which I know that's certainly challenging, for my personal home. Our insurance has definitely gone up, and that's frustrating. It's an extra cost. But I don't know that we have really a clear answer for that, other than, the state seems to be trying to work on that to solve it. Whether they actually have solved it, that's yet to be determined. We're not seeing the results of that just yet, but supposedly that's supposed to show up this year. So right now we're going to have to be in a wait and see situation.
What I find interesting is the condos. What I've noticed is like the property, the purchase price, or it's going down, but the HOAs a lot of them are ridiculous. I had a buyer who was interested in a condo.
Mm-hmm.
It was for 125, and I think they dropped it down to 110.
Yeah.
But the HOA was 2,600.
Yeah, for the year?
No.
Oh, per month?
Yeah. And that whole complex, they all had different prices, but all was like astronomical. And a person that needs a $125,000 home, I don't think they can afford a $2,600 a month HOA.
Yeah, that's actually really high.
High.
Was that in a resort? I can't hear you. You're muted.
She's on mute.
Yeah, sorry. It's in Winter Park, but it's not even like a good, like a upscale community. It's just like a basic, I think the condos are like 1980.
Did you how did you find out
confirmed. I called the agent and I called the HOA and they confirmed, and they said if I wanted more information, I'd have to get an estoppel.
So it sounds to me like that's unusually high. There may be they may have reserve issues, right? Mm-hmm. Where they don't have enough in reserves because the state is now really being much more strict on making sure that HOAs have reserves. They also may have to go, especially at that age, they may have to be doing their 40-year reevaluation for the property, recertification, which is expensive. And so it may be that the HOA is trying to make up, because that's unusually high. That's very, very high. So my only thought on that is that the HOA is trying to make up for backfilling reserves, and or they have a recertification they have to do, and they don't have the money to be able to do it. So that sounds like an HOA that has financial trouble, because $2,600, that's obscene. I have not ever seen that much. So, but this is part of the challenge with condo associations and HOAs too. HOAs are not as impactful as condo associations. Condo associations are responsible for maintaining reserves for the entire building because the association is responsible for maintaining the building itself and all of the amenities around it. So if the association is not managing the income for the association dues appropriately to pull in reserves, right, to be able to pay for all the things that the building needs over time, they may find themselves in a position where they have to, this big bill that they have to take care of, and it might be timely, and they have to do it fast. Otherwise, then it becomes a financial problem. They become a financial burden. And this is the challenge here is that, it's the association members that are also living in the property that have to agree to increase their dues. And most people, if they're not savvy, they just try to find ways to to lower their dues as opposed to increase them. And if there is not enough money, and if they're not thinking forward about, hey, we need to have this in reserve in the event that we need to do XYZ, right, to replace a roof, or to fix some major thing, or upgrade some major thing over time, or do our 40-year recertification, whatever that case may be. If they are not doing their own if they're not taking that future view of things, and they're just looking at the short term, what my HOA dues are today, they could ultimately end up preventing the condo association from having the funds available to be able to do this, which will ultimately cause them to have HOA dues like this. Because HOA dues of $2,600 is just like, why would anyone pay that? Nobody would pay that. If you got a $2,600 HOA and you got to pay for the property, like you might as well buy a house.
Exactly. And a good house too.
Oh, yeah.
Like a pretty decent sized house.
Yeah, so that it sounds like
Nice.
that HOA is probably in financial trouble. That's what that sounds like. So, and that's unfortunate because, you know, that could cause that whole project to just fall apart, and all of those owners in there may lose their shirts on that, because that building, if it doesn't get recertified, they may not be able to live there. So that causes all kinds of problems. So if you see something that's an outlier like that, typically there's some revealing up front, and the estoppel, which is something that's now they have to share, you know, that would probably showcase that there's some line item in there that's probably causing the HOA to have to charge that fee, right?
Okay. Yeah. My buyer said no, of course.
Yeah, there's no way. Nobody's gonna buy in there. There's no way anyone's buying a buying into a $2,600 HOA. There's no chance. So
they probably get audited or something. Maybe the building got audited.
Well,
they're probably buying.
Well, part of the new rules that Florida has is that all buildings have to go through a recertification, and they have to also meet certain reserve requirements. So if they're not abiding by the rules, they can get in trouble, and that could cause obviously some problems. If they don't get recertified, they could. I mean, I don't know for certain if this is how the process goes, but you know, there's a possibility that they could condemn the building because it's not been recertified as safe to live in. If it's not safe to live in,
oh wow,
you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
And then you can't sell a condo that's not safe to live in. Who the hell's going to buy that? Nobody. Right?
Oh wow.
So it could be all kinds of problems down the line. So so you know, a condo that's a good steward of the money that comes in for the condo association is highly valuable. And the state is now put in more strict rules on how that money needs to be managed, so that we don't run into this. South Florida is specifically running into that problem because a lot of those condo associations were not good stewards of the funds that they brought in. They didn't bring in enough funds, or they just mismanaged those funds or whatever. And that really came about because, if you guys remember, about 2 years ago, that building that collapsed on the beach, and, you know, and they don't want that to happen. And you know, my wife actually, she does property management, and one of the properties that she manages is a multifamily building apartment, and it got the recertification. They paid the money. It was recertified, and then they ended up finding that through a renovation that was happening, that one of the main pillars that holds the building up is actually degraded, and the rebar in it is completely degraded, and there's a potential problem with that part of the building collapsing. So,
oh wow.
And that's a building that was recertified. So even the recertification process it sounds to me like there is still gaps in the recertification process, because the recertification, they should have found that. They should have said, oh, we can't recertify this because this pillar over here is not going to be strong enough to hold this over time, and there's a risk of collapse. And I mean, what are they going to do? Like, they have to solve that problem, right? And that's after they got recertified. So even a recertification, it sounds like they don't have, you know, that's not fully worked out yet, because they basically recertified a building that is in danger of collapse because it's completely degraded. So it's the condo association part of this part of the real estate world is, I think, going to continue to be a problem over time, and most of that problem has to do with you know, our building methodologies. It's still not clear on how long a building or a structure can last over time, especially a structure that has a lot of weight to it. So you can talk about apartment building, it's very, you know, typically they're a few stories tall and it's a big building. Compared to a house will last a lot longer because it's not as big, right? So it's not as much weight being put on the concrete and the rebar and stuff like that. So yes, over time it will eventually lose something, but compared to a building that has so many more tons of weight sitting on top of it, like that building is, is likely to have more issues over time versus, let's say, a house, because there's just more stress on a bigger building. And we don't really have clarity on like how long is that rebar actually going to last? How long is that concrete actually going to last? Like, there's not real clarity on that. So, I think that the condo sector of the real estate market is going to continue having challenges if they don't find a solution to that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question. I know that KW, well, ours doesn't do rental, but if I have my own personal property that I want to rent, can I still put it on, not Stellar, but I saw there's like a little rental app on.
Yeah,
like,
you're free to rent the property out, your own property, and market it all you want. You can. I mean, the problem is that we don't have the appropriate insurances for managing rentals, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the appropriate insurances, and we're not really built for managing rentals. So the reason why KW does not advocate for agents managing rentals is because we're not really built for managing rentals. We're built for like home sales and for people buying and selling homes. We're not really built for that. We don't have the appropriate insurances. We don't have really the mechanisms, the systems in place for that. So it's not really a good use of our models because our models do not fit that. You're permitted to do those. Just realize that we don't really have the appropriate insurances, and if something goes awry, then you may be on your own because the brokerage doesn't have the appropriate insurances for that. Now, so I don't recommend it because typically it's not. It's not good income unless that's your business model. You can get residuals, but I would say you'd probably want to build a whole business model around that, and not, maybe sales is not your primary. But if you're going to go that direction, then KW is just not really designed for that. So it's not that you can't. Yeah.
Or you could use the company called Rickstein. Is it Rickstein?
Yeah, Rickstein. Yeah, Rickstein is the company. Now, for your own, it's your property. You can put that out all you want. Just remember, we got to follow the same rules that we do for for as realtors. We can't discriminate. We can't. All the things that we have to follow. All of the ethics that we got to follow all those same ethics rules and stuff like that. I would look into what additional rules might exist for rentals, because I know that for rentals they have additional rules they have to follow as it relates to renting to folks. So you just got to make sure that you're following those rules, and as long as you follow those rules for your own property, I think it'll be fine.
So are you saying I can list it on the MLS?
You can, yeah. There's nothing wrong with it.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not. It's not illegal for you to do it. It's not even unethical for you to do it. It's your own property. Right?
Okay.
And you happen to be an agent that has access to the resource. There's nothing wrong with doing it. It's just, like I said, we're not really built for that. So, to make that a part of your business model is not recommended because we just don't have the systems and mechanisms in place for that. And our insurances are not really designed around managing rental property.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to get my business model. I just don't want to pay mortgage on a place where I'm not staying.
Yeah, no, totally leverage whatever resources you have as a realtor. You're well within your right to do that. What I would just say is just make sure that you're following, look up the rules for rentals. Because they do have slightly different rules. Just to make sure that you're abiding by the rules, and all of them are really kind of common sense stuff. So just, don't discriminate. Everyone has to be able to have access. You can't limit who can access the property and all kinds of stuff. So you just got to make sure, you can't market it in certain ways. There's certain things that you can say versus you can't say, those kinds of things. So just make sure you're following those rules, and you should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? You guys have any other, you have any challenges you're dealing with or any wins you want to talk about this week before I let you guys go?
I do, but I was going to wait to see if Ann has anything to say because I've been talking a lot.
Okay.
Oh, no, that's fine. Actually, I just have two quick questions for Gus.
Yeah.
Can you please explain how sellers financing works? And question number two, can a VA ask a seller to buy down the rate?
I don't see why a seller, or rather a buyer, couldn't ask a seller to buy down the rate. So I'll answer that one first.
Okay.
It's basically just a concession going back to, so basically the concession goes back to the buyer to cover like their closing costs, and then the buyer can choose to use that concession to buy down the rate. It's up to the buyer to determine
it's a concession.
Yeah, like as long as the concession doesn't exceed whatever the limitations of the VA lender, so they may cap how much they can contribute.
Oh, okay.
So just talk to the lender, ask them, hey, what's the maximum contribution for that they can give towards buyer closing costs, and then see what they say, and then whatever that maximum contribution is, that is what you can ask for at the most.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Okay.
got you. Okay.
Now, with regard to seller financing is, so the way the seller financing works is basically the seller acts as the bank, right? In most cases, the seller either has no mortgage or their mortgage is very, very low. And the buyer, as long as the buyer comes with enough cash to cover, if they have a mortgage, if the buyer comes with enough cash to cover the mortgage amount, then the seller can now do seller financing, right? Because then they can take that loan off of the table, right? And now there's no loan available that's on the table anymore because they paid it. And then now the seller can finance the balance, right? So let's say you got a $500,000 home, there's a $100,000 mortgage on it. If the buyer comes in and pays the $100,000 mortgage off with cash, or maybe they pay a little more than that, typically they'll want a little more than that, but let's say they pay the $100,000 off and now there's no loan anymore, the balance, that $400,000, can now be seller financed by the seller. Okay.
Oh,
and now what the seller does is the seller, now this is something that you'll have to work with an attorney to put together the mortgage note. Okay. So there will be a mortgage note, just like a bank has a mortgage note. So the seller and buyer need to put together a mortgage note that they both agree on. Okay. And that's going to be something that's put together by an attorney. So typically an attorney will charge somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 to put something like that together. Okay. So they put together the mortgage note, and then that mortgage note will identify what the terms of the seller financing is. And the terms are really up to the seller and buyer coming to an agreement. So if the seller says that they want to do interest only at 10% for 3 years and then a balloon payment, great. If the seller says, and they both agree, great. If they agree to, a flat fee mortgage payment for the next 5 years, and then after that there's interest paid or something, then great. If there is, it doesn't matter, the terms are whatever they both agree to. If they both are agreeable to the terms, then that's what you kind of put together. What you have to figure out is, what's the reason for the seller financing, right? If the buyer wants seller financing because, let's say, for example, they want to limit how much their expenses are for the next 5 years, then you you want to make sure the seller is aware of that, so that and make sure that it makes sense for the seller to identify, well, what would that need to look like in order for that work for you? So if the buyer says, well, I don't want to pay more than $2,500 a month for the next 5 years, but then after that, I'm happy to do a regular mortgage, or I'm happy to pay it off, then you might do like something where it's interest only for 5 years with a cap of $2,500 a month, and that is only going towards interest. And then at 5 years, when they pay it off, then they're paying, let's say it's a $500,000 or $400,000 note, they pay $400,000 at 5 years, and then now the seller gets the 5 years of interest, and then at year 5, at the end of year 5, they get the $400 balance, right? Which can be a refinance, or it doesn't have to be that the buyer has to pay it out of their pocket. Like at the end of 5 years, they can say, hey, Mr. Bank, I want to refinance my house. The bank comes in and puts in a loan, right? And the money is given to the buyer to refinance the house, and then that money is given to the seller to buy the seller out, and now the buyer has a mortgage on their own.
Oh,
So there's a couple
wow.
of there's all kinds of different ways.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the advantage to doing seller financing from the seller's perspective is if that's an investment property for the seller, right? Or maybe a second home, they have to pay capital gains on the proceeds, right? They got to pay capital gains on the proceeds. So, if you do a seller finance, well, there's a different calculation that's done if you're a bank to, on how those proceeds look like from a tax perspective, one, and two, you're not getting the full amount up front. You're getting it in payments, so your tax burden is substantially less. So there's a better, sort of tax advantage. Now that's going to be dependent on the seller and there's certain situations. And obviously I'm not a CPA, so, I'm not trying to give tax advice here, but that is one of the potential benefits of seller financing, right, for the seller. And then, there's also the understanding what the seller's motivations are. If the seller is like, hey, I don't necessarily need all this cash, but I'd like to have just regular income coming in. And if I can get $3,500 a month of regular income for the next 20 years, that would be fine.
Yeah.
Then you structure it so that it's all, hey, this is your income that you're going to be getting. You structure it so that $3,500 is the payment. You let the buyer know that, hey, can you do $3,500 for the next 20 years? Yes, or 30 years, or whatever time frame you guys agree to. And the seller might be happy because like, hey, great, I'm retired. I have now this regular income that I get every month. And, I only have to pay a portion of capital gains on the income, which is less than income tax. And it's only on a portion because remember the principal amount that's going back to to pay back the loan, that there's no capital gains on the principal amount. It's only paid on the interest because the interest is actual income, but the principal amount is actually a payment back on the loan that the seller gave the buyer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you don't pay interest on the loan because that's a payment back of the loan. I gave you $100. I loaned you $100. If you give me back my $100, it's not income. You're paying me back on the $100.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Now, if I charge you 25 cents or per month on the $100, and I end up making $10 over the course of a couple years, right? Then when you pay me my $100, I do still have to pay on all the 25 cents that I made over the span of that time. So if I made $10 in interest, I gotta pay capital gains on that interest.
Oh.
Because that is income. So it's you just have to kind of understand the way that income works, to see that, and it all depends on what the seller needs and what's best for the buyer, and they just have to come to an agreement on what that ultimately looks like. And they can be structured whatever way they both agree to. Whatever you do, just make sure you have an attorney actually write up the mortgage documents, because that's not something we can do. That's not something that you want to get like, oh, let me get this standard form that I found online. Like, I would not recommend that. That's something you definitely want an attorney to write up to make sure that the seller is protected, to make sure the buyer is protected, right? And then all the terms, everyone's agreeable to all the terms that's in the agreement.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I have a quick question to add to that.
Sure.
So you said that the mortgage has to be paid off. So if it's not paid off, that's where an assumable mortgage happens, and the mortgage company has to agree to that, right?
Well, okay. So the mortgage does not have to be paid off completely in order for a seller to accept seller financing. They just would need to pay it off once the property move, like you transfer the title from the seller to the buyer, right? So let's say, for example, they have a $100,000 mortgage. If the buyer comes with $150,000 in cash as their down payment, then the seller can pay off the $100,000 mortgage. You see what I'm saying? So there could be a mortgage on there as long as the mortgage gets paid off at the transfer of title, because once the transfer of title happens, that's going to trigger the mortgage company to get the note paid. Right? That's typically going to trigger the mortgage company to say, hey, listen, you transfer title, you got to pay everything else in full. That's very normal language that you'll see in most mortgage documents, right? If the title transfer happens, then you have to pay off the mortgage balance in total. Now, an assumable loan is, yes, you're right. It does require the bank's approval. So typically, the bank will kind of identify at the time of the loan whether or not it's assumable, but not always. But the bank needs to be able to approve whether or not an assumption is possible, and then that way they can go ahead and decide to move forward with the assumption of a loan. So if there's a loan in place, VA, for example, does assumable loans. If there is an assumption of a loan, then, as long as all the parties agree to the assumption and all the parties would include the mortgage company, then the mortgage could be assumed. There may be, there's some costs that are involved with that. So you just got to make sure you get clarity on what those closing costs are going to look like.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So my question is that, I said I got a physical listing. She said I have the listing and she just wants me to send her the paperwork for her to sign.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't done a presentation. I don't agree to the price that she had. And so she said that we could do Zoom. So how would I, with the seller presentation, do I still do the same thing and just share files with her via Zoom?
I would do the seller presentation as a digital format. So just, create a PDF version of it.
Oh, okay.
Right. And then just present it as part of the Zoom. What's going to be really important is because, a lot of times they're going to be like, I just want to know, I just want to get to the paperwork, which is fine. But, and if she's already like, hey, I'm willing to let you use it, that's fine. And if you want to go straight to the documents, if she's willing to just go ahead and sign, but if there's something that you're not agreeable to in the deal, so for example, if the price is not right, then before you have her sign paperwork, you probably want to make sure that you guys can come to an agreement on using the market analysis on what a reasonable price point is going to be. Because obviously it doesn't make any sense for you to sell a home that you're not able to actually get sold. Right? For you to list a property that you can't sell, because you're not going to make any money on that, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to make money. She's not going to make any money because you can't sell it, and then she's just going to get frustrated with you as the agent that you didn't sell it, and there's something that you did not to sell it, as opposed to it's not priced appropriately.
Yeah.
So, and especially in this market, we have to be much more conscious of what's going on in the market and how that's going to impact the list price. So, go ahead.
Yeah. Her price was unreasonable back in December when she fired her other agent.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not reasonable right now.
Yeah. So I would definitely say that you're going to want to have that conversation before you get listing paperwork signed, just to make sure you guys are agreeable to the list price, because part of the listing paperwork is going to identify what you're going to list it for. So you need to come to an agreement on what the actual list price is going to be, because if she has a $350,000 house and she wants to sell it for $500,000, you're never going to sell it. So you're going to spend time and money on a project that it's never going to get sold, and she's going to get upset with you that you never sold her $350,000 home for $500,000, right? So, and I'm not saying that those are the numbers, but I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, and I have another question. So she has 2 homes, and she has another agent that's selling the house, the other house, and he already agreed to 2% and 2% his fee, 2% buyer's agent fee. And she's like, yeah, I want to do this, but we never had a conversation. So I'm wondering, is it worth it for me to have a conversation about my fee being different, or should I accept it since she already has another agent and a house on the market?
So what you ultimately accept as your compensation is completely up to you, right? I can't really tell you whether it's worth it or not, because you have to determine whether it's worth it for you. Now, what I can say is the rationale behind showcasing your listing presentation is to let them see what it is that you're bringing to the table and what value you're bringing, so that you can justify whatever compensation you're asking for. So if you want to ask, for example, for something more than that, you want to justify what you're asking for, right? And show them, this is what I'm planning on doing. This is how I operate. These are the things that I do. This is the value that I bring. This is why I charge X% for compensation, right? So that listing presentation really helps to sort of establish what value you're bringing to the table, because not every agent is built the same, right? And then at the end of the day, if she's stuck on, let's say 2%, for example, and 2% out, if you feel that that is going to be worth your time to engage, then that's really going to be up to you. I can't really tell you if that's worth it or not. That's really a you decision, because that you have to decide within your business if that works within your business model.
Okay. I guess the only reason I'm questioning is because she already has an agent that's doing that. And she was telling me that her and the agent had an open house, and she brought cookies and a whole bunch of stuff. And she's like, I'm willing to do whatever I can. And I guess she likes working with him. So that's the only reason. I don't know why he accepted 2%. Or what they agreed on. But
I mean, that again, every agent can, it's all negotiable. So if that's what he thought he wanted to accept, and that's really, if that works for his business model, maybe that works. I don't know.
Yeah.
What I would be asking, is he local? Is he in the same market?
No, I think that house is in Daytona. I have to double check. I wanted to ask her, and I forgot to ask for his name so I can contact him. It's just to see where the house is and stuff like that.
Gotcha. I mean, like I said, I think that I wouldn't necessarily worry about what another agent is charging. We each have the freedom to, negotiate our own compensation of what we think works for our business. So what I would suggest is identify where you think that number makes sense for you. Use your listing presentation to justify whatever compensation you think is fair. And, whatever you guys come to an agreement on is really going to be based on, there's going to be a ground floor where you're going to say, I don't know if I can do this. So identify what that is. And it may be 2%, it may be less than that, maybe more than that. That is for you to do. So you have to kind of identify for yourself what makes sense for you and your business.
Okay, so another idea that I had is charge her a higher brokerage fee, but take the 2%.
Again, that's something that you are free to do. There's nothing that is preventing you from doing that. So I don't know that it's going to necessarily make up much of a difference, but yeah, that's it. You have the freedom, this is your business. This is the thing that I really want to emphasize here. This is your business, so you have to determine what makes sense for your business. And you have the freedom to be able to be creative with how you want to be compensated. And that could be part of a flat fee component. There could be the percentage component. So you determine what makes sense for you, and then you negotiate whatever makes sense for you. And then if there's a number that doesn't make sense for you, then you decide whether or not you want to really take this listing. So I would just say, have confidence in your abilities, know that you're bringing some value to the table, and then negotiate what you think is a fair compensation for the work that you're going to be putting in.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you for the PowerPoint idea. I never thought about it that way, but it's definitely a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. You guys have any other questions?
Yes, one more for me, the last one.
Okay.
So remember I told you about the listing that I might be picking up, which was run by a real estate company.
Okay.
It was managed by a real estate company.
Yes.
So I spoke to the owner. She said she never gave them permission to sell if she decided to sell.
Okay.
But when I look at the MLS listing, it says exclusive right to sell. I know they leased it. They manage it and lease it to tenant, but MLS says exclusive right to sell.
So you would probably need to get a copy of the management agreement and review it.
Okay.
So I would ask the owner if she could send you a copy of the management agreement, just to see if there's anything in there that specifies that they have an exclusive right to sell. And if they do, just remember, we cannot help her cancel any agreement that she has with them. All we can do is just say, listen, unfortunately, it looks like you have an agreement that's in the document that identifies them as they have the right to sell this property. So if you want me to assist you, the only way that I can assist you is you're going to have to talk with them about what that's going to how you can go ahead and figure that out so that you have the ability to, because you can't have two listing agreements working in parallel.
Yeah, because she just texted me just now. She said she called them and told them to expect a call from me to pick up the key. So I need to find out before all that if they have the right to sell this listing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to get clarity on that, because if they have a right to, here's the thing, if they have a right to list it, and then you also sign that you have a right to list it, and it gets sold, both commissions are due.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And you don't want to put the seller in that position. So you want to make sure that they understand that, listen, you can't have two listings at the same time, because if it sells and there are two listings on it, commission is due to both brokers.
Okay.
Right? So just make sure that she's aware of that. So, I would have her review the agreement and just make sure that there's not anything in there about listing. If there is something about listing, then she's going to have to address that with them and make sure that she works out how she can cancel that listing. But we can't help her cancel it, and we can't list it if she already has a listing agreement.
And if she don't have an agreement with them, when I approach them, what would I actually say to them? Just how would you approach them if she don't have agreement with them?
If she does not?
Yeah.
What do you mean, how would you approach them? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, she told me to, she called them and told them to expect a call from me, and I'll be picking up the keys.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do all that unless like you said, I'm sure that there's no agreement on file.
Oh,
but
yeah, I wouldn't pick up the keys until you get that cleared.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I would say you need to get that cleared. You can't do any work for her until you get clarity on whether or not they already have an agreement with her, because there may be a cancellation fee on that agreement, right? To cancel the listing, the ability for them to list, and that means that she needs to pay that before she could even get out of it, and she may not be willing to pay that, and then that may kill the whole situation, and now you can't list it because she needs to pay that, right? Or whatever the case may be. Now you can make an agreement to say, hey, listen, if you do decide that you want to cancel that other agreement and they have a fee, I'd be happy to reimburse you as long as it's reasonable. Like, let's say it's $1,000. I could be happy to reimburse you for that cost at closing, but that's the most that I can do for you. I can't really do anything else.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you.
No worries.
My goodness.
I'm glad. I hope that's helpful for you guys.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, listen,
thank you.
That's all she wrote. If you guys have anything else or need anything else, please let me know. I'm going to be camping this weekend, so I will have my phone, but I won't have access to a computer. So if you have any questions you need answered, let me know. You can text me or give me a call. I'm just not going to have my computer do anything on my computer. So just FYI, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, guys.
All right.
Have a great weekend.
Take care. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.